Thanks so much for joining. I really do appreciate it. I know you're busy. Did you have a good trip? You were abroad over the weekend, were you? Or
Yeah, I went to Dubai. Always
oh,
have a good
lovely.
time there. Yeah, absolutely.
I haven't been. I'd absolutely love to go. I've heard some really good things. Um,
Mixed feelings about it, people have.
yeah, it's kind of apparently quite sterile. It's a bit like Canary Wharf in the desert. I've heard it
Yeah,
called. But then you've,
that's a good
but
description.
but then you've got the beautiful the water looks amazing, like hot weather, consistent nice weather all year round. It's apparently amazing for small businesses as well. Like they have
Yeah.
really good tax treatment. I know that's the case. um, Obviously you don't have a small business. Maybe we could kick off, you could just maybe tell us a little bit about yourself, because obviously you ran quite a big business, you still do. Maybe you can tell us a little about sort of the history of that and what's happened in terms of span
So
and
no, actually,
aid
my
sleep.
my current venture is only 8 months old. We're
Okay.
quite small. We're kind of trying new things. But so my background is in medicine. My training is in internal medicine and oncology. I
Hmm.
did a master's in genomic medicine and cancer biology after that from University of Manchester, then Nottingham.
Hmm.
That's kind of my professional training. But a few years ago, I started a company called Span Health along
Hmm.
with a co-founder of mine. I was the medical guy. He was the software guy. And what we did at Span Health, we basically we would help people with bio wearables like
Hmm.
CGMs, any kind of device that measures sleep, exercise metrics like
Hmm.
Whoop, Aura, 8 Sleep, all of these devices. We
Hmm.
would help them interpret the data you get from these devices and how to use that data to improve your life. So basically,
Hmm.
you would connect the data to your app. Then the app will give you kind of advanced analysis on the data, and then and more importantly, we built this huge library of recommendations, health recommendations based on changes in your metrics. Because
Hmm.
one of the biggest problems that we found people face with when they start measuring their biology is, okay, I have all of this data, but how can I use this to improve
Hmm.
my health, right? I have a low HRV, I have high resting heart
Hmm.
rate. What's next? How do I improve these
Hmm.
metrics? And that's the question that we focused on at Span. So we went through multiple rounds of funding. We eventually got acquired by 8Sleep, which is an American-based company. um, then I worked with 8Sleep with their sleep coaching product for about 6 months before I left. And so then, I started a new company called Numenor Health, which is,
Hmm.
so at Numenor, it's kind of a continuation of what we did at Span. At Span, we focused on optimizing lifestyle, so
Hmm.
sleep, exercise, nutrition through wearable data or biowearable data. But the problem we faced, and something that I discovered working on this problem, was that you can only do so much with biowearable data without blood tests, without actual medical tests. And you can only do so much with lifestyle. And interestingly enough, most of the people who came to us at Span and even at Numenor, most of our users are people who have optimized their lifestyle. They know the importance of sleep. They eat well, they exercise well, but they want to take that next step. They're asking, what do I do next to kind of improve and optimize my longevity? We call them optimizers at Span
Hmm.
because that was kind of a category of
Hmm.
users. Yeah, so that's kind of my history and where we are today.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, I know it's funny you mentioned the word optimizers. I noticed that Mark Zuckerberg was someone that uses 8Sleep, which is the company that I believe took over your company, and he was, commenting on how valuable that was as part of his. I'm sure he has many different systems that he uses to monitor his health, etc., including probably the best, doctors, etc. But so it's interesting that that's kind of, an emerging sort of marketing group.
Yeah, I mean, they used to be called biohackers, right? Biohackers are people who kind of go go rogue and do self
Cyborgs, yeah.
experimentation. Yeah, or it's more about self experimentation. But I really believe that this is a good tool to use to optimize your health, which is kind of N=1 experiments, which are so when you look at the large studies, and if you want to be evidence based, um, you're looking for solutions or medical interventions that help on average, right? But it's difficult to know if that medical solution or even medication or any intervention will help you personally, right? You might not be in the category of that represents the average person. So that's where N=1 experiments come into play, and that's actually something we do at Numenor, which is we help people identify what interventions work for them, even if that intervention can be sometimes, let's say, less well established from an evidence point of view. Because so my first criteria is that there needs to be plausibility. There needs to be in order to kind of recommend someone do something, there needs to be some kind of plausibility for that intervention to work. And there needs to be no better alternatives that have better evidence. We can go into examples here, but I think N=1 experiments should be an important part of everyone's health stack.
Sure. And so Numenor, is it? How do you actually then? What's the actual main metric? Do you have some kind of
Yep.
wearable that measures glucose, or what's the kind of main?
Oh yeah, I didn't mention this. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
So at Numenor we do blood tests, we do scans, we do medical grade fitness tests. So we actually focus. We also include biowearable data, but we mostly focus on kind of blood tests and scans. So we do, depending on the person, but it's about every 6 months we would do a full body analysis, full body. So that would include blood biomarkers, looking at every single system of your body. We'll do a scan, a DEXA scan, which looks at your body compartments, visceral fat, fat percentage. And then we do a medical grade fitness test, which looks at the main metric we're measuring here is VO2 max, which is a very important metric representing your kind of cardiorespiratory fitness and correlates very strongly with longevity and overall survival. So those are the metrics we look at. And once we have a comprehensive picture of your health, then we can put a plan going forward to what can we optimize to improve those metrics.
And so
and
it's
that will include lifestyle and prescription medications. Yeah.
Sure. Okay. Awesome. And so would that be people take blood tests themselves at home? They send it into you guys, and they do that every week or something like that, or do they come to? Do you go to your general practitioner, your doctor, and
No,
he
so
does?
actually, we cover all the tests. Right now, it's most we require people to go into the lab, so they go physically into the lab and have a blood draw. We're experimenting with sending phlebotomists to your home. So yeah, so some people prefer them prefer us to send this phlebotomist to their home.
Cool. Yeah. No, I mean
And it won't be every week. It would be every 3 to 6 months, depending on the
Gotcha.
person. Usually, every 6 months is quite is enough for most people who don't have acute medical issues.
Yeah. And it seems like longevity is a fast growing market. People are thinking about it a lot more. I guess it's just as you already alluded to, it's a symptom of our modern times where maybe there aren't so many imminent dangers as there were in years or centuries gone past. So people are kind of looking ahead, and there's that hope, and in that way it's a great business, isn't it? Because it's hard to really, and I guess that's sort of one of the things that companies like yourselves are pursuing, is that real ability to track and say, okay, your biological age now is 45, but you're actually showing up on our markers as 60. Therefore, let's do this, that, and the other thing. So, but I guess in a way, the business is great because you can't measure it, and people have this hope, but you're not going to really ever know. They can keep paying, as I do. I've got these supplements.
That's actually a good
Yeah.
point, but actually, like in a traditional sense, a business like this isn't a good business. And the reason for that is, I'm sure you've heard of this distinction between vitamins and painkillers, right? And you always want to be a painkiller rather than a vitamin. vitamin business do work, but so this is more of a vitamin business. And what just
Sorry, I
to
haven't
clarify
heard
the
that analogy. So
right.
yeah, sorry.
That's fine. So a painkiller, when a painkiller you need right now. If you have
Mhm,
pain, you can't do anything else until that pain
mhm,
goes away, and you're willing to pay. So the problem is acute. It's
mhm.
very obvious to the person, whereas a vitamin is supposed to improve your overall health and survival kind of long term.
Gotcha.
So the problem isn't acute, right? You don't, and
Mhm,
when you take a vitamin, you don't really feel any different.
mhm,
So it's kind of a preventing problems
mhm,
that will arise in the future. Um, uh, so that's the distinction, and there's different types of businesses that can fall into these categories,
mm,
but in general, traditionally businesses that are painkillers do better, right? Whereas the reason for that is that vitamin type businesses need a lot of education. So you need
mhm.
to educate the person to the presence of the issue and then sell them the solution. Um, now, I mean, that's the reason for me going into this business is not really motivated by I just doing the thing that is most profitable. It's more
Mhm,
like I'm interested in this problem the most.
mhm,
That's why I don't really care about this distinction. But
mhm,
I think you're right in the sense that there is a rise in people interested in this area and
mhm,
becoming aware of the
mhm,
acute problem of
mhm,
age-related diseases. So,
mhm,
in my opinion, it is an acute problem. I think it's the biggest problem. Aging and age-related diseases is the biggest
mhm.
problem, and for me, it feels acute, but not for everyone. Um,
Yeah,
but
I
it's
agree.
becoming more and more acute for people. Yeah,
I think you're absolutely right. I think people are seeing it more as an acute problem. People are more aware, perhaps it feels to me anyway, of their mortality. Maybe it's just that I'm getting older. I had a very good friend actually about 2 weeks ago, age 44, professional guy, died in the night, and so it makes one very aware of one's own mortality. I'm 48 now, and I think a lot of people, like you said, are really thinking about this issue more and more now, and they're testing. I do testing for prostate cancer. I've done one for bowel cancer. I'm not a hypochondriac by any means. I'm genuinely not, but it's just people are more aware of health issues and of that regard. I think these days, and it
yeah. And
kind
the
of
thing is,
yeah.
what people are starting to appreciate more and understand
Mhm,
more, and our understanding, our scientific understanding is improving as well of these conditions. Is that age-related diseases mostly start quite at a quite young age, and
mhm,
they start as small, subtle changes that we don't notice, um, and then they accumulate over time, and then they present themselves as
mhm,
proper diagnoses or diseases later in life. So, for example, heart disease or metabolic dysfunction is a good example here, where usually the changes start in your 30s,
mhm,
maybe even earlier. And these changes, um, so one underappreciated factor, I think, in factors that increase the risk of age-related diseases is the factor of time. And
mhm,
what I mean by that is, uh, let's give an example of raised LDL cholesterol levels, right? Which is a sometimes labeled bad cholesterol, which is atherogenic cholesterol causing atherosclerosis. If you have a slight increase over kind of what's considered to be normal, um, that might not increase your risk of heart disease significantly, especially if you're younger. However, the duration of exposure, and this has been done in recent studies, where they showed that duration of exposure is probably more important than the actual level of your
mhm,
cholesterol. So, for example, if you've had a slight raise in cholesterol, but you've had it for 20 years, so that duration, that means you've been accumulating atherosclerotic changes over 20 years. Um, so that really highlights the importance of identifying changes early on and also rectifying those changes early on. The problem with kind of what I think the problem with modern medicine is that we don't really take this long term view of health seriously. So, for example, most physicians and most guidelines will highlight a 10-year risk
Hmm.
of heart disease as the metric for medical intervention, as the threshold for medical intervention. So, for example, if you are 40, or you said you're 48, and you had a raised, you had kind of a disordered lipids on your blood test, your physician will probably say, okay, your 10-year risk of heart disease isn't that high, so we probably don't need to intervene now. But
Hmm.
if you did nothing about it and you come back when you're 60 or 65, your 10-year risk of heart disease with the exact same tests will be high enough for them to say, okay, we need to intervene now. We
Hmm.
need to start you on some kind of medication to lower that risk. But nothing has changed between
Hmm.
those two tests. The only thing that has changed is that your age has increased, right? So, and the reason for that is we're looking at 10-year risk of heart disease. But what about 20-year risk? What can I do today to lower my 20-year risk, my 30-year risk? Because we know that these changes are associated with
Hmm.
acute diseases in that time frame. So that's the question I'm interested in: is what can I do today to lower my risk of age-related diseases 20, 30,
Hmm.
even 40 years in the future? And
Yeah.
we should think about doing that safely
Mm.
and effectively.
And as I say, I think this is something that it feels like a lot more people are asking themselves these days. And so what do you think is, in terms of longevity? Obviously, there are a lot of different forecasts out there, a lot of people trying to predict how long people can live. What age do you think someone born today could live to if they take the right steps?
I don't think we've made any progress on moving
Mm.
the genetically determined maximum. So our genetically determined maximum is the number of years you can live genetically. We're programmed to age at a certain rate, and I don't think we can change that with current technology. So I don't think we can live more than 120 years. I think that's kind of roughly the agreed upon average or maximum. Um, we can increase the average, but I don't think we can increase the maximum just yet. There are potential candidates down the line that might move that, but they're it's still kind of in the realm of science fiction right now.
Okay, that's interesting because there are some of these pundits out there. I'm sure you've seen them. I think it was Mr. David Sinclair, perhaps, and there's another guy. I think it's David Nutt, if I remember correctly. And I guess you get more clicks and more views if you say people are going to live to 200 or whatever it is. What about these studies they've done in mice? I think they've given them, I think it's NMN or something like that. What are your views on that, where they can extend a mouse's lifespan by 50% with some of these treatments?
Yeah. So, I mean, look, there are one of the potential candidates for increasing the genetically determined maximum of humans is kind of genetic therapies, and more specifically, I mean, the work of like people like David Sinclair, which is epigenetic reprogramming. And what they do is they claim to be able to reduce the age of cells by reprogramming the kind of genome of the cell to a younger state. Um, and this might work, and if it does work, that would be great, and it might move the needle. Right now, they haven't been able to demonstrate it in a way that is likely to translate to humans in any time soon. But yeah, I mean, it's great work, and I hope it works.
Yeah.
And there's a huge effort going on in Alto's lab, which is
Okay, I'm not familiar with that one.
it's basically a huge VC backed by, I think, people like Jeff Bezos, and they're very well funded, and they're focusing on this problem of epigenetic reprogramming to extend life. So this might become a reality in the future. But right now, I think it's still kind of
Pie in the sky stuff, science fiction. Yeah.
it's still basically just in basic research, and 90% of basic research doesn't really translate to humans. And in order to attract funders, in order to attract investors, you need to have a compelling story. And David Sinclair is a very good storyteller.
Hmm.
A fantastic scientist, but also a very good storyteller, and we have to kind of keep that in mind. For us on on the clinical side, I'm always so clinical is basically like, I'm dealing with interventions with humans every
Hmm.
day, right? And for people who are dealing with mice, they live in a totally different world. So I'm always skeptical about interventions that work in mice until we have evidence that they can help humans.
Sure. I mean,
Because, as I said, 90% of them don't work. But yeah, I was just going to say, you said, what about interventions that increase the maximum of mice? And those
mhm,
exist. And one of them, for example, is rapamycin. You mentioned
mhm,
NMN, but actually NMN doesn't really have that good evidence in humans or mice, really.
mhm,
Um, Recent evidence of NMN makes me not recommend it to people,
mhm,
just because lack of evidence in efficacy in humans. Things like rapamycin have been shown to extend lifespan. However, I think that's probably the best molecule we have that potentially can increase
mm,
human lifespan right now. And we have demonstrated safety in humans. But we need to take into consideration that this is a calorie restriction mimetic, which means it mimics the effect of calorie restriction, which is another intervention that can extend lifespan in mice. Um, the problem with calorie restriction and lifespan is that we might be extending lifespan, but we're not sure if we're actually lowering quality of life. So that's something that we have to measure.
mm.
So for example, if a client of mine said that I want to go on calorie restriction or one of these calorie restriction mimetics, then I'd have to make sure that we're measuring certain markers of quality of life. So things like muscle mass, things like
Mm.
subjective quality of life measures, just to make sure that we're not extending your lifespan while being frail and while lowering your metabolism and making you feel like crap, right? So a lot of these mice that live longer, they they might not, live a quality of life that we would want for
Sure.
ourselves.
Yeah, I mean, I guess there are two ways to skin a cat. So maybe David Sinclair and these guys, they're kind of taking like the 30,000 foot macro view. You're kind of more
Yeah,
boots on the ground dealing with people on a day-to-day basis, and you can't,
yeah.
it's a different game. So maybe they'll make a huge breakthrough in 10 years, 20 years, 40 years, which changes the game a bit. Um, I guess, yeah, and I hear you in terms of the calorie restriction. It's one of those things where, do you want to live to be 100, but you're starving and feeling ropey the whole time, or do you want to, do you want to live to be 75, but you're eating?
Well,
And I guess the
by
other,
the way, it's not necessarily the case. So, for
yeah,
example, it's interesting to see that actually people who are taking rapamycin aren't actually showing a breakdown in skeletal muscle. Like that is
mm,
one of the potential side effects, but in reality, we don't actually see that much. And so we maybe our understanding is deficient. So people on calorie restriction. I mean, a famous example is Brian Johnson, who is, the headline is he's spending $2 million a year to extend his lifespan
mhm,
and conquer death. But one of the main interventions that he's doing is calorie restriction,
mhm,
and he's a famous example because he's all over social media, and he actually looks good.
mhm.
He doesn't
He
have
does look
he
good,
has
yeah.
a very low fat percentage, and he seems to have a very good muscle mass while being on kind of calorie restriction. So your body adapts to low calorie states and it slows down your metabolism, and that might have health benefits. There are some studies that show that calorie restriction um, can improve lipid markers and metabolic markers as well.
So, question for you, rapamycin. How could someone listening get rapamycin into their system? Is there a supplement they can take, or is it prescription only? How do we get
Yeah,
this found of
rapamycin
use?
is a prescription medication. It's a naturally occurring substance, but it has quite strong effects on our cells.
Hmm.
What rapamycin does is kind of on a clinical level, rapamycin is used clinically every day in people who have things like liver transplant, kidney transplants, Why? Because rapamycin lowers it's an immunomodulator, which means it kind of modulates your immune system. But at certain doses and certain frequency, it depresses your immune system. And that leads to lower rejection of organs in people who are organ transplant patients.
Hmm.
However, used in animal studies, we see that certain doses of rapamycin and certain frequency can extend lifespan, right, and actually improve markers of health.
Hmm.
So that is leading a lot of people to speculate that rapamycin in humans can have a similar effect. So that's why there's increasing usage of rapamycin as an off-label prescription,
Hmm.
um, in people who are trying to use it as
Hmm.
a longevity drug. And I've worked with people who are taking it,
Hmm.
who source it from
Hmm.
different sources, and there's published data on this recently. Matt Kaberlin published a paper showing safety in taking something like 6 milligrams once weekly,
Hmm.
in I think more than 100 subjects.
Hang on, I'm
Um,
writing this down. I know
but I wouldn't
ashwagandha.
recommend that dose.
I think
I wouldn't
ashwagandha
recommend.
is okay. Sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
I just want to say that I wouldn't recommend starting at
Okay.
something like 6 milligrams once weekly.
Sure.
The data that I've looked at, we've done a comprehensive look at rapamycin, and did our best to translate the animal studies to human dosages. And I think it's probably best to take a dose every 2 weeks rather than 1 week. That's my speculation. Just because rapamycin peaks in your blood
Hmm.
around 1.8 hours after ingestion. Then it starts going down, and the half life of rapamycin is quite long. So by day 5, so 5 days after ingestion, the rapamycin is out of your bloodstream. But the intermittent dosage of rapamycin is probably the best strategy to
Hmm.
avoid suppressing your immune system. You don't want it to accumulate in your body, so that would lead to that would lead me to speculate that taking it every 2 weeks, but every 2 weeks would be
Hmm.
probably the best strategy to get that intermittent effect, but also give
Hmm.
your body some time to recover and build up your immune system and prevent accumulation.
Hmm.
So yeah, that's kind of
Gotcha.
my take on the data.
And I think,
However, I
yeah.
just want to say that
Mm.
rapamycin is a prescription drug,
Hmm.
and it's not licensed, or it's not licensed for longevity related purposes in humans, and the evidence for that is unclear. So just
Sure.
discuss
Yeah,
this with your
absolutely.
doctor if you're interested.
Absolutely, yeah, definitely speak to your doctor before. But it's just interesting to speak to an expert like yourself, especially as this is an emerging focus for a lot of people, and obviously in the medical community, and in terms of VC investment, etc. So to speak to someone like yourself and find out what you'd perhaps do or what you would recommend. I know, obviously, people have to check with their medical provider first. I think ashwagandha is one that sort of Indian, I don't know whether you would class it as Ayurvedic, but my understanding is that there were some longevity effects from ashwagandha. I think they might have been related to rapamycin. I don't know if you've heard about that, or if that's if there's a way that you could get some of these prescription drugs or longevity treating drugs in a way that is sort of accessible to people outside of that prescription area. Like if
Yeah,
you yeah.
so ashwagandha is an interesting one. Ashwagandha is a supplement,
Hmm.
to my knowledge. I don't think it's a prescription medication, so
No,
it's
that's
sold.
correct. You
Yeah,
can get it all. You can get it OTC,
yeah,
over the counter. Yeah.
yeah, and there are some interesting benefits to it. Mostly, I don't think it has any kind of longevity or benefits, but I think it's more related to things like it's an anxiety supplement. It can also improve hormone health a little bit when it comes to things like testosterone.
Hmm.
There's some evidence that it can help with testosterone levels. Um, I don't think there's any other
Okay.
effects, acute, strong effects that I know
Sure.
of.
And what other supplements do you yourself take, or even people you know who are in your field? What sort of supplements? I mean, I've got a few things here, which I bought at one time or another: berberine, and then I got NAC, and then I've got Terostil Bene. I've got too many of these. So, and I find it difficult to also just continue, because you take these, it goes back to what I was saying earlier. You take these and then nothing really happens. Maybe you took them for a month, but you're not going to find out till you're 80 whether you had any effect, and you have to take it that whole
Yeah,
time.
yeah, true. I use any intervention that we recommend, especially if it's a prescription medication, we always pair it with a effectiveness marker. So we want
Mm-hmm.
to measure the effect that we're having on the person. However, as you said, supplements in most cases, especially general health supplements, it's difficult to measure the effectiveness of
Mm-hmm.
supplements. But so we rely on kind of data and medical literature to see what the best supplements that we can recommend. Now, I've done a comprehensive review of supplements for longevity and general health.
Mm-hmm.
This is part of our supplement guide at Numenor. We give it
Okay.
out for free for people who sign up. So basically, I'll give you my two-tier supplement guide. So tier one is supplements with higher level of evidence. Tier two is kind of lower level of evidence.
Mm-hmm.
Tier one, I would classify creatine monohydrate
Mm-hmm.
as tier one supplement, which is a supplement that can improve muscle health. It can improve strength. It has a few other benefits. I would recommend maybe 3 grams a day.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And then vitamin D, if you're
Mm-hmm.
deficient in vitamin D, that's a
Mm-hmm.
tier one supplement. If you're not deficient and you're not getting enough sun, you can probably take a maintenance dose.
Mm-hmm.
But you'd probably ideally want to measure your vitamin D
Mm-hmm.
levels before starting vitamin D supplements. Another one is L-carnitine, acetyl L-carnitine. Can help with brain function, can help with circulatory and cardiovascular health.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Another supplement, I mean, I class it as a high level supplement, is protein
Mm-hmm.
supplementation through protein powders. And
Mm-hmm.
the reason for that is most people don't actually consume enough protein from their
Mm-hmm.
food intake. If you are, then that's fine. But if you're not, then supplementing with protein would be a good idea. And I would recommend I would recommend
Mm-hmm.
uh, whey protein. Find a premium whey protein that is
Mm-hmm.
high in BCAAs and low in all
Mm-hmm.
the other crap that comes with protein, like carbs and flavoring and all of that. Um, I would
Interesting.
also, yeah,
Because these are all kind of, a few of these are supplements that weightlifters take, and sometimes you hear scare stories. I have anyway in the past, probably from someone
yeah,
that has no idea what they're talking about. That creatine or L-carnitine could be, they get associated with steroids. So
yeah.
that's really interesting. But go on. Are there any
Yeah,
other?
so that's most of the issues with bodybuilders is, as you said,
Mm,
from steroids or pre-workout supplements that I don't
mm-hmm,
recommend. They usually have huge levels of caffeine
mm-hmm,
and other stimulants. So these supplements that I'm talking about are mostly are like very safe supplements if taken in the recommended dosages and taken in the correct way.
mm-hmm.
Obviously, consult with your medical provider before you start
Absolutely,
anything.
for
But
everything. Yeah,
um, yeah, absolutely. But in
yeah.
general, like these have high levels of evidence that
Mm-hmm,
they can be useful. So we said protein powder. We recommended whey. If you're vegan, I would recommend a blend of pea and rice. So
mm-hmm,
probably 70-30 has the highest or has the most similar
mm-hmm.
amino acid composition to whey protein. So that would be 70% pea, 30% rice
Okay.
protein. And then there's a few other interesting supplements. So things like you mentioned N-acetylcysteine
Mm-hmm,
(NAC).
mm-hmm,
If you pair that with an amino acid called glycine or glutathione as well, that seems to have an antioxidant effect, especially in people over 45. There's some evidence to show that it can lower inflammatory markers like homocysteine as well. So yeah, I do think that there's some evidence behind that.
Interesting. Well, yeah, this
And yeah,
pterostilbene, this supposedly mimics calorific deficit. What do I? Don't listen to me. Listen to Adam,
no,
guys. Don't listen to me.
I just want to say that in general, people put like too much weight on supplements in general when it comes to their health, because it's easy to consume supplements. It's easy to say I'm popping this pill that's improving my health. However, I would say that if you're supplements are kind of an adjunct, they're more of a something that is nice to have, but you're probably not getting that much benefit from any supplement. Nothing near what you could get from exercise and proper nutrition.
Well,
So,
I totally yeah. Sorry, yeah.
Yeah, so the cornerstone would be starting with interventions. So the way I classify interventions, medical interventions, are you need to think about cost and benefit, right? So you want to start with high benefit interventions regardless of cost. So, for example, exercise, I would say, is a high cost, high benefit intervention. The reason why I say high cost is because I'm looking at the time investment here. You're investing like 1 hour, 5 times a week. That's a lot of investment, but the benefit is worth it. So that's where I would classify exercise. Whereas supplements is probably low benefit, high cost, right? In some cases, or low cost, low benefit.
Sure.
So I would, think about what are the highest benefit interventions first, and then after that go to the lower benefit interventions.
Awesome. And are there any other supplements that you take personally that maybe you just maybe aren't part of the aging focus, but that you feel are beneficial? I mean, I take these IQ DHAA what is it, fish oil tablets and flaxseed oil, and then I have zinc. Personally.
Yeah, so the next thing I was going to mention was APA, DHA, fish oil. The American Heart Association recommends one gram daily. So yeah, that would be a recommendation of mine.
Interesting.
The evidence is kind of not exactly clear, but I think there is some evidence, and some researchers really believe in this. I've heard some experts in this area say that getting fish oil from oily fish like salmon, for example, is better than supplementation. So just putting that out there.
Interesting.
So that would be kind of my list. There's a few others on the list, but those would be the important ones.
So if people want to get the full list, Numenor, what's the website? Just so that if people want to really
Numenor
get
Health,
deep in the weeds.
Health,
okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool. And in terms of obviously people so obviously exercise. I know that I was in a job where I came to a point where I couldn't leave my desk. I was like stuck to the desk. I couldn't move. I could stand up, but I couldn't be away from the desk for very long. And I recently got back into going to the gym and doing weights, and just like I really felt in various different ways. I won't go into the detail in all the ways, but I felt so much healthier. I was like, geez, I've got to keep doing this. And as I mentioned before, I'm 48 now, and it just feels like my dad had 5 stents put in his heart, and so you kind of think, if you don't keep your vascular system strong, and I think for men, especially older men who are getting middle-aged and older, it feels like you really need to lift weight to kind of put your body through its paces and get those sort of the vascular system in use, because I guess it's like use it or lose it. What's your thoughts on that in terms of weight training for older men?
Yeah, so the importance of weights training is there are some cardiovascular benefits. There's also muscle mass benefits, which so muscle mass is very much correlated to overall survival and longevity. And the way I think this works is that having a high muscle mass acts like as a sink of
Mm.
blood glucose. I think Peter Attia described your muscle
Mm.
mass as a sink, which I like that description. So basically, having high levels of glucose in your bloodstream is toxic to your body, but you need it at normal levels. So having a high muscle mass can act as a absorbent for excess blood glucose. But let me talk about cardiac health
Mm.
for a little bit,
Mm.
because this is really important, because heart disease is the number one killer in worldwide, right? And especially, as you said, for males, because and for females post menopause is the same, by the way. So we need to focus on a few different areas of cardiac health. And the biggest misunderstanding of cardiac health, in my opinion, is that people underestimate the genetic component here. If everyone is dying from cardiac health, it's not because we all have a bad lifestyle, or we all have like increased susceptibility to. Well, we do, but the reason for that is it's just a part of aging, and that's how humans die. Is we die of
Mm.
heart disease in most cases,
Mm.
and then other causes are like other causes of death include cancer, and other chronic diseases. So you need to. So what causes heart disease? I mean, we don't know everything about heart disease, but we know what metrics, what health metrics do correlate with increased heart disease. And one of the important ones and underappreciated ones is blood pressure. So high blood pressure. So you need to lower your blood pressure as much as possible within normal range without having symptoms of low blood pressure. Another thing you should monitor is metabolic markers, so insulin resistance markers, blood glucose metabolism markers. They're very important and very much correlated with cardiac disease. Inflammation markers. So increased inflammation overall is correlated to cardiac disease. One of the measures of that is high sensitivity CRP, homocysteine. Some people include uric acid. So these are measures to think about when it comes to cardiac disease. And perhaps more importantly, your lipid profile. So we're looking at things like apolipoprotein B, LP little a, LDL cholesterol, HDL cholesterol. These are all markers of our cholesterol transport system in your body, and the way cholesterol is moved from different compartments and different systems in your body. And this is all your lipid profile is part of your overall kind of metabolic health. When you have an increased LDL cholesterol or ApoB, and as we explained previously, the time component is really important here. So getting these measurements into a normal range early on, I think, is crucial.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a recent study that just came out from the American Heart Association that shows that aggressive lowering of cholesterol levels is not associated with stroke or cognitive decline as was previously thought. So previously, some people had some reservations about targeting these markers aggressively in people because at the end of the day, our cells do need cholesterol. Cholesterol is
Mm-hmm.
part of every cell in our body. So there was some apprehension about lowering LDL cholesterol, ApoB, these markers of atherogenic cholesterol aggressively, because that might lead to negative outcomes. But if there's within healthy ranges, and even the lower end of healthy ranges seems to be cardioprotective, and also doesn't lead to harmful effects. So
If
those
I
would be the
understand,
markers that I would think
mhm,
about, that I can think about now.
understood. So just so I make sure I understood what you said, if you aggressively cut your cholesterol, it used to be that people thought that could be dangerous, but now the data is showing that that's fine. You can aggressively try to address these things. And
Yeah,
okay, interesting. And in terms of, so obviously you've mentioned about exercise. That's the most important thing. Then you can do some supplementation. Obviously, get blood work done. Have a look at cholesterol. Heart is key. I guess your company, if we go on your website, you handle these things via your blood work. If you send blood to yourselves, these are the types of things, all these things you just mentioned that we can
yeah,
monitor. via the system.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And
Um, I mean, there's a few other markers as well that we can talk about, but yeah, those are the ones that come to mind at the moment.
okay, these are the key things. And in terms of now, a lot of people, men and women, are looking to take potentially these days taking steroids at older age, whether it's a very minimal dose for one reason or another. Women, obviously, with perimenopausal or menopausal for those reasons. Men, sometimes it's for vanity, but sometimes it's also about, as you mentioned, about increasing muscle mass or keeping the muscle mass, which as we get older starts to diminish. So, what do you think about that? I know it's becoming quite fashionable for people men to take testosterone replacement therapy. It sounds quite dangerous to me. I know that if you take, correct me if I'm wrong, you take too much, your body doesn't produce it in the
Yeah.
correct way anymore. So just what's your
Yeah,
view on that?
this is an area that I'm less of an expert on. However, my area of expertise is mostly in cancer and
Mm,
kind of internal medicine. Uh, but I'm a bit apprehensive about. So I've been looking at the evidence of testosterone replacement in men and also in females. And for someone who has seen, many cancer cases, so for example, in females, the most common cancer is breast cancer.
mm,
In males, it's like I'm talking about cancers that are specific to
mm-hmm,
one gender. In males, is prostate cancer.
mm-hmm,
Those two cancers, in most cases, are very sensitive to our hormone environment, right? Um, so the reason why I would be apprehensive about testosterone replacement therapy and estrogen replacement in females is that are we increasing risk of these cancers
mm,
developing? And also, what is the effect on our heart? Because
mm,
there might be an effect on heart disease here. When we
mm-hmm,
have a closer look at the data, uh, there have been studies done on females with hormone replacement therapy. Um, we know that hormone replacement therapy improves symptoms and quality of life markedly, right? When you look at the data, there is a slight increase in heart disease and cancer incidence, certain female-related cancer. Uh, However, if you look at the data closely, it might be related to the types of hormones that were given back in the day when these studies were done.
mm-hmm,
Now this has improved a lot, and the way we give hormones has improved, has changed a lot. So there might be the data that we might be relying on might be a bit old. There needs to be probably more better studies done here.
mm-hmm,
So to me, it's an open question
mm-hmm,
when it comes to hormone replacement without hormone deficiency. However, if you do have kind of a naturally occurring a pathologically occurring hormone deficiency, so you have low testosterone that's leading to side effects like
mm-hmm,
low libido, low energy, etc., then absolutely hormone replacement is a good idea. However, if you're just taking it to boost your quality of life,
mm-hmm,
then I would suspect there's going to be consequences of heart disease, increased
mm-hmm.
incidence of heart disease and cancer in that situation. However, looking at the data, it's mixed. Like it's not clear cut.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I would suspect it. So basically, the answer is not entirely clear in females.
Mm-hmm.
In males, it's a bit clearer that testosterone replacement can have negative consequences. However, it is recommended in people who have true testosterone deficiency. If you don't have
Mm-hmm.
testosterone deficiency, then it probably will lead to
Mm-hmm.
negative consequences.
And just in terms of, so we've covered the main things: exercise, obviously, heart health. In terms of intermittent fasting or fasting in any way, I know you obviously mentioned calorie restriction earlier. Do you think some kind of fasting every week is something that people should try to do, or what's your view on that?
I don't think so.
Mm,
I'm less of a proponent of
mm,
fasting. First of all, the benefits of fasting and intermittent fasting have been shown to be similar to the benefits of just of overall calorie restriction without fasting. So when we compare people who, for example, consume the same amount of calories over a single day, but people who consume those same calories in a window of 6 or 8 hours versus 12 hours, there's no difference in health markers, in the change of health markers. So it seems to be related to the calorie intake rather than the time of the time restriction. But if that works for you and you need to, and that helps you regulate your food intake, then by all means. The caveat I would put here is that prolonged fasting is associated with decreased or breakdown of your muscle mass. So if you are doing prolonged fasting, you need to mitigate that risk by focusing on resistance training and getting enough protein. And it's difficult to get enough protein over a short period of eating. So, for example, if you're targeting, let's say, 120 grams of protein a day, you'll get better muscle synthesis if you distribute that over 3 to 4 meals a day instead of getting all your protein in 1 or 2 meals. So that's my only take on intermittent fasting.
And in terms of then just moving on to brain health, is there anything you do yourself for brain health? Do you take nootropics, or I know we spoke about fish oil earlier, and that supposedly has benefits for brain health. Just wondering if there's
I
anything
haven't
else.
seen a better nootropic than just good old caffeine. So 2 cups of caffeine of coffee a day is probably the best nootropic that I can come up with. In general, exercise has profound effects on brain health, as we all know. But there might be specific like exercise related improvements so when you exercise. Your brain produces this protein called BDNF, which is specific for exercise. So it's difficult to get this protein, which is a neuroprotector, without exercise. So that's why exercise needs to be part of any kind of neuroprotective protocol.
Interesting. So that's kind of reiterating or reinforcing what you said earlier about exercise being kind of the number one, right? And then
Because it
supplementation
affects
second.
every
Yeah.
single system that we talk about. Like it's the cornerstone of every single system.
Cool. And in terms of yourself, are you like a ultra marathon runner, or do you practice what you preach? I know it's everything that you said sounds like it makes 100% sense. Do you do a lot of exercise yourself? I know you're very busy. You've got a lot of other things like we all do. Just wondering how you balance that.
I have 2 exercise regimes:
Hmm.
the busy Adam exercise protocol and the not so busy Adam exercise protocol. So when I'm not busy, the weeks that I'm not busy, I put more focus on things like mobility, flexibility, balance, stability. Things that I wouldn't do when I'm busy. When I'm busy, I have to prioritize. So I focus on resistance training, cardiovascular health through one. I try to get 1 HIIT session a week at least.
Okay.
And the HIIT protocol I follow is a 4x4x4. So I would do 4 minutes of high intensity, targeting 90% above 90% of my maximum heart rate, and then 4 minutes of moderate intensity. And then I would repeat that 4 times. So that the reason why I do HIIT training is that has the biggest effect on VO2 max, which is the marker we talked about previously that
Gotcha.
is correlated to overall survival. So I would try to do at least 1 HIIT session once a week, and then do at least 2 sessions of resistance training once a week. And then if I have the time, I'll incorporate things like flexibility, mobility, and other
Yoga,
other
maybe.
markers of exercise.
Yeah.
So yoga would be
Yeah.
under flexibility, right? Which is really important, by the way, and really important, especially after age 30. So I try to do 5 minutes of flexibility every morning, but I don't always stick to that.
Yeah, I mean it's difficult. Let's face it, for anyone, and especially I know you're obviously running you've successfully sold your previous business, and you've got this new business that you're building. I'm sure you have to spend a lot of time maybe talking to VCs or entertaining. Sorry, I don't know what that. Sorry for that. And then so I get it. It's difficult, and it's difficult for everyone. As you can always have the best intentions. In terms of I mean, yoga, I think. What about meditation? Is that something you look at? I know that's kind of peripheral, but is that
Yeah.
something that you put
So
any credence
I
in?
always say that, like, so the way I look at interventions to improve your health, I put them into two kind of categories. So there's lifestyle, and then there's prescription medications and procedures. So in the lifestyle bucket, I would say, as you said, exercise, nutrition, sleep,
Mm,
avoidance of harm, and mental health. And
mm-hmm,
that's where I think meditation goes into the mental health bucket. When I say avoidance of harm, by the way, that's another important one we didn't talk about, which is basically avoiding smoking and
mm-hmm,
reduction of alcohol intake.
mm-hmm.
But yeah, meditation definitely falls into mental health. It's not my specialty, but it's not something that I do. I have practiced meditation in the past. It's not something I do at the moment. I just feel like the the positive effects of meditation I can kind of get by just being kind of self-aware.
Mm-hmm.
But I might be wrong. Maybe I should go back to it.
I know what you mean. I did it for a long time. I try to do it when I can, but it's like all the things we've discussed. It takes time, and sometimes you just don't have that time, or you have to prioritize something else. So I guess now I see we're running up on time. Just I guess sort of just following up there, just finally. Well, I was going to ask about your booze intake. How much do you drink, or are you a non-drinker? How do
No,
you
no,
handle that?
I'm a non-drinker.
Oh, good for you. Okay. Did you ever drink, or you just never? It was never
No,
something.
never got into it. Yeah.
Fantastic. I think there are a lot of younger people who are like that these days, which is great. I mean, I said to my own kids, "Don't drink," and maybe I didn't have to say it because they've seen my antics. But can I ask, how old are you, and where actually are you from? Because I detect a slight accent. Just
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. I'm 33 this year, and I'm half Irish, half
You look
Jordanian.
21. Okay, half
Well,
Irish, half German.
well,
Cool.
not really,
Yep.
but yeah, I'm half Irish, half Jordanian,
Oh,
and I
Jordanian.
was
Okay.
born in London, but I've lived all over the world, so I've acquired an international accent.
Yeah, well, people say the same about me. These guys sort of I was in the US and the UK. So maybe just finally to wrap up, you could tell us just about your company that you sold and what was the biggest baller thing you did when you sold your business?
I guess I wasn't. There's no one point I can point to, but the experience was very interesting because I would say there were a lot of mistakes that we did throughout the process that we've learned from. Um, so if I went back in time, um, I would probably do things differently. But it was a good outcome, and yeah, uh, it was a
Awesome.
great experience.
Awesome. Okay, well, Adam, I really do appreciate your time today. Thank you so much. It's been really interesting, all the various insights. Maybe you could just let people know once again where to reach you if you have any sites or social media or whatever
Yeah,
that where
so
you.
social media, Doctor Adam Bat,
Mhm.
DRADAMBAT, and Numenor Health is the website.
Awesome. Okay,
Thank you so
Adam,
much for
thanks so
having me.
much. Yeah, we'll keep in touch.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You take care.